This is a video lesson for Module 3, Lesson 1. The Lesson 1 learning target is I can investigate and use the formulas for area and perimeter of rectangles. So we're going to be reviewing a few concepts that you probably learned in a previous grade and seeing how we can use these concepts to help us with multiplication. So let's go ahead and jump in and get started with the first problem. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to review the two concepts of perimeter and area. So in both of these concepts, we're going to be looking at rectangles, and a couple things that we're going to need to be aware of are two things called length and width. So length is typically abbreviated with a little L that looks like this, and width is typically abbreviated with a W. The length of a rectangle is one of the sides of the rectangle, so it really doesn't matter which side you choose. I'm going to choose the length to be this side right here. And then the width is the different side of the rectangle, so the width will be right up here. Now you see that there are two side lengths of the rectangle that are the same, so both of these represent the length, and then the top and the bottom sides represent the width. When we're looking at the perimeter of a rectangle, we're looking at the distance that it goes around the rectangle. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight right now. Let's see so we're looking from the distance from this corner to this corner, then down to this corner, over to here, and then back up to here. And so what we're essentially doing is we're counting the number of units that it takes to go around the outside of the rectangle. So since this is only a one-dimensional measurement, this measurement is typically given in just units, or if it was given a specific type of measurement like inches or centimeters, we might represent it in inches or centimeters. Moving on to area, once again we're focusing on this idea of width and length, and it's the same for this rectangle. The difference between perimeter and area is that the area is this measurement of the space inside the rectangle. So I'm looking for a measurement that tells me how much space is filled inside this rectangle. I'm coloring it in as best I can, but yeah, here we go. So the space inside the rectangle. You can see that inside this rectangle we have these small little squares, and this is the unit that we're using to measure the area of a rectangle. We're using square units, which sometimes is represented as units squared. We also might use square inches if our measurement of a rectangle is in inches, which might be represented like this, or square centimeters if that's what a rectangle is measured in centimeters. And the reason we have this 2 here is because we're working with 2 dimensions. We're working with width and length because the combination of those are making these squares on the inside. So now that we have a little bit of a refresher about what perimeter and area is, we can take a look at how we can calculate the perimeter and area of rectangles using specific formulas. So starting with perimeter, when we are looking to find the perimeter of a rectangle, we're simply going to take a look at what the length and the width is of this rectangle and add in or add all 4 of those values together. So the formula that we're going to be using for the perimeter of a rectangle is we're going to be taking the width plus the width plus the length plus the length, and that's going to equal the perimeter. So when we're looking at this rectangle over here, we can simply count the number of units that the length and the width are. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 along one side. And luckily I know that this length over here is the same, so it's 8 along this side as well. And then I'm going to count up the width here. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I know that the width of the bottom is equal to 6 as well. So if I were going to find the perimeter of this rectangle, I would add the width, 6, plus the width, 6. Then I'm going to add the length, 8, plus the length. I'm adding the length twice because there's a length here and then a length over here as well, and the width twice because there's the bottom and the top of the rectangle. So when I add these two together, I can simplify it down to 12 plus 16, which is the same as 28. And since I don't have a specific type of measurement unit, I just say it's 28 units is the perimeter of this rectangle. So looking at this formula, we can kind of, or this perimeter formula, we can kind of simplify it in a way by combining the width and the length together. So since we know that the width, there's two widths and two lengths, we could also write this formula as 2 times the width plus 2 times the length. Now if we're going to do that for this formula with the same example, we could do 2 times 6 plus 2 times 8. And if we did that, it would just be 12 plus 16, kind of like what we did up here. And we get the same answer of 28 units. We can simplify this formula even further by saying it's 2 times the width plus the length. So if back to our example, we can do 2 times 6 plus 8. And so that's going to be equal to 2 times 14, which is equal to 28 units. So we have 3 different ways that we can write this perimeter formula, each one of them resulting in the same answer. All of them are just a little bit different ways that we can look at finding the perimeter for a rectangle. So moving on to area here, there's a few different ways that we can think about the area of a rectangle. We talked a little bit earlier about how it represents the space inside the rectangle. So one of the ways that we can calculate the area is just by simply counting up all the square units inside of a rectangle. So I can just count them out here, 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9. Just keep on counting them all the way up. And I get an area of 27 units squared. I'm using square units because I'm calculating for the area, and I'm looking at these square units on the inside. So that's one of the strategies I could use. If there's a grid, I can count up all the different square units that are inside the area, or inside the rectangle. But that's not a very efficient strategy, so let's move on to a little bit more efficient strategy. This one we're going to utilize the width and the length of our rectangle. I know that the width is 3 and that the length of this rectangle is 9. And so I'm going to break up the rectangle into chunks of 3 square units. And if I know that each one of these rows here is equal to 3 square units, I can simply skip count by 3 9 times until I get up to, until I count all of the different chunks here. So I go 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24, 27, and I get the same answer, 27 units squared, because I have the same rectangle. But once again, that's not even the most efficient way. We're moving into the final way we can calculate area, which is just viewing, which is actually using the area formula for finding the area of a rectangle. Once again, we're going to be using the width and length for this. So we know that the width is 3 and the length is 9. And we are simply going to multiply the width, which is 3, times the length, which is 9. And that's going to give us our answer of 27 units squared. So when we're thinking about the formula for the area of a rectangle is equal to the width times the length. So if we know the width and we know the length, we're able to calculate what the area is of a rectangle. Now, something else we can do when we are, since we know that formula for the area of a rectangle, we could also find a missing length or a missing width of a rectangle if we are given the area. So remember that the formula for our area of a rectangle is that the area equals the length times the width. So if we look at the situation we have right here with this rectangle, we know the area right here is 27 inches squared. We don't know what the width is, or the length is, and we know that the width is, we know that the width is 3 inches here. And so using our knowledge of multiplication, we can say that 3 times something is going to equal 27. And if we think about what that could be, well, we know that 3 times 9 equals 27. So because 3 times 9 equals 27, we know that the length of this rectangle is 9 inches, just like it was in the previous problems. So using this formula here, we were able to plug in what we knew, in this case the area and the width, and that helped us determine what the length was by using the formula to figure out what times 3 would equal 27. So that does it for our first lesson here on area and perimeter. You should be able to solve any of the problems in the lesson 1 problem set. But if you need any refreshers on these concepts, please feel free to come back and rewatch any part of the video to get a little bit of extra help. So good luck with the problem set, and thanks for watching.